Hi, and welcome to Inside Iowa Politics. I'm Gray Television's Iowa Political Director, Dave Price. Well, we've made it through the Iowa primary elections, and we'll have some final thoughts on what the results could mean in November. That's coming up a bit later in the final five. But first, we wanted to talk about something that we haven't heard a lot about since it happened last October. In case you hadn't noticed, the U.S. House of Representatives has been a cluster of chaos. Republicans have a slim majority there, and far-right Republicans have been fighting with other Republicans over which person should be the Speaker of the House. Iowa's 1st District Republican Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks had initially supported Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan for Speaker. Jordan was the choice of some of these far-right Republicans, but Miller-Meeks then switched over her support to Kay Granger of Texas. She said calls and emails poured in, and Miller-Meeks said that some of them included death threats because she did not support the candidate that some of these people had demanded. I asked Miller-Meeks about this in our interview before Tuesday's primary election, but we wanted some more time to work on the reporting on this story. So here is how she handled the threat, she told me. Earlier in your career, you served in the U.S. military. Your husband did as well. If I remember right, your dad did too. Was that right?
Yeah, my father was career Air Force. 6 out of the 8 children were in the military. My husband's family, 5 of the 9 were in the military. So we're from a long family of people who've had the privilege of serving our country.
Whether it is in regard to your position on Ukraine, the speaker's election, any of this, where you have people alleging that you have committed treason, that you're a traitor. How serious an allegation is that to you, and how do you respond to that? You've had threats, you've had people yell at you, send stuff to the office. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, first and foremost, it's unfortunately part of the job in an era where we have rapid social media, rapid dispensing of information. But I take the comments about treason very seriously. I think I swore an oath to defend our Constitution from enemies, foreign and domestic. I did that when I enlisted when I was 18. I did it when I became an officer. When I was 22, or 20, I guess I was. And then I did it when I was sworn into the state Senate, as well as sworn into Congress. I take very seriously my job and my responsibility to protect this country and our national security. And that may mean, and in this case, I felt that it did, to help to fund Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan. I think it's very important for our national security. We know what isolationist leads to and what happens when America takes a backseat in the world.
You answer that very measured. You don't say you're offended. You don't say you're ticked off. You're hurt. Like, those words don't cut you to the core?
Whether I was hurt or disappointed or angry doesn't relieve the responsibility I have to do my job. And I think one of the things you learn as being in the military, and then both as a nurse and a doctor, when you're dealing with critical situations, you learn to focus on what's the most important thing. And my feelings in this case aren't the most important thing. The most important thing is to read the bill, to understand the situation, to gather information, make an assessment, and then put forward the best vote and the best policy that you can do. We wanted more metrics for Ukraine. We wanted outcome measures so that we would know how we're spending the money. None of us, and we had put in, in investigatory, so we can make sure that there is investigations into where the money goes. And the money isn't going directly to Ukraine. We have the money, they're purchasing weapons from us, and then the money is spent down. That we're not sending money over there like Biden did to Iran in a truck or on pallets, or Obama did to Iran. We're not doing that. That's not what's happening. So I take my job more seriously than I take the insults that are to me. And you just learn to live with it because unfortunately it's part of this job.
Has anybody paid the price for the death threats to your office? Will anybody ever be arrested for that? I mean, that's as serious as it gets.
It was serious, and those individuals were contacted. They were made known that this is taken seriously, that it's not idle. And I think, unfortunately, sometimes people blow off steam and say things that they shouldn't say. But we had protection if we needed protection. We have an alarm system. And so I didn't feel that I was in, imminent danger. And so therefore, we didn't go any further. We followed what the direction was of the Capitol Police and our local police.
I've received very little information from U.S. Capitol Police about this investigation. Here is the short statement that we received. Quote, "For safety reasons, the USCP does not discuss potential investigations." End quote. I followed up on this asking if there had been any arrest or charges in this since this happened last October. We're talking about 8 months or so. We have not heard anything back. I will update this story if we do hear more. Time now for the Inside Iowa Politics Final Five. Number one, bad behavior. When did it become accessible for people to make threats, especially death threats, violence against politicians and others just because they don't agree with what you do? We are seeing more of that, it seems. We saw it with the death threats against Representative Miller-Meeks. We saw it in the January 6th attack in the U.S. Capitol building. We've seen it in some of the race riots. We've seen it in some of the anti-Israel protests. Something that seems to have changed in the last several years in our country. It seems like there's more of this. Number two, holding politicians accountable. Should voters demand that politicians actively condemn this type of behavior? Should you refuse to vote for someone if that person does not condemn threats and violence? Do you believe strongly enough to do that? Number three, the protest vote. If you look at the final numbers for Miller-Meeks' race in the 1st Congressional District and Randy Feenstra's Republican primary in the 4th Congressional District, these challengers earned at least 40% of the vote on primary night. That's a pretty good chunk of people. Does it mean anything? Is it just a temporary protest vote? Or will these people refuse to back the Republican incumbents this November? That would be a big step here, but it's something that I think we should watch. Number four, the Democratic turnout. Former USDA official Anand Bakam easily won the 3rd District Democratic primary against his challenger, Melissa Vine, 85% of the vote. If you look at the final numbers, this race attracted about 7,500 fewer Democrats than when Zach Nunn won his Republican primary to earn this congressional seat in the 3rd back in 2022. Does that mean anything for Democrats? Is there a lack of enthusiasm, or did they just look at this that it wasn't a really competitive race and they'll be there this November? Another thing I think that is worth watching. Finally, number five, speaking of something worth watching, the Iowa Libertarians. So they have major party status. They're actually on the ballot because of how they performed in the previous election. But what will they do with this? You talk to people, they're mad at Democrats, they're mad at Republicans, but will there actually be a libertarian in our state that captures enough support to win someplace? If you look at the ballot, you see some of the registered libertarians running for some state house seats. Can they actually win one? We haven't seen that before, so I'm curious if libertarians, now that they have a shot here and an easier chance to get more prominence, will they do anything with it, or will they kind of disappear again? What do you think about this week's show? Always encourage your feedback. Respond to me in whatever way is comfortable to you. I do read these messages and we appreciate your feedback. Thanks for joining us this week.